Rain-slicked streets reflected the fractured glow of neon, and the city seemed to hold its breath. Somewhere in the fog, a shadow moved, silent, deliberate, unseen. A single note, typewritten and signed, had appeared overnight. The phantom waits at midnight. The bridge knows the truth. You cannot hide. No one knew who wrote it, and no one knew why. But one thing was certain. The game had begun, and a mystery was lurking where steel met mist, ready to unravel secrets long buried. Someone or something was watching, and the city itself seemed to shiver with anticipation. In the heart of the fog, only one man could untangle the puzzle, and only one assistant could follow the trail without getting lost in the shadows. If you're ready to uncover the secrets of the phantom and walk the misty streets of mystery with Nero Wolfe, make sure to like, share, and subscribe, and hit the bell icon so you never miss a twist in this thrilling noir journey. Chapter 1. Shadows on the old bridge. Rain fell in a steady, whispering drizzle, soft enough to calm the nerves, but persistent enough to make the city streets shimmer like liquid mirrors. I was perched at the corner of a dimly lit bar near the old railway bridge, a bourbon sweating in my hand, listening to the hum of neon signs that flickered against puddles on the cracked pavement. The city smelled of wet asphalt and iron, a scent that always reminded me that danger was quietly lurking, wrapped in anonymity. That's when Wolfe appeared. He came out of the fog as if it were a part of him, the brim of his hat casting a shadow over the sharp line of his face, cane tapping with rhythmic authority. He carried the calm of a man entirely in control, yet there was an unusual tension in his eyes that immediately made me sit up straighter. "Archie," he said, his voice low but precise, slicing through the gentle hiss of rain on the windows. "Someone is playing a game, a delicate game, and they've dared to invite us." He tossed an envelope across the table, its yellowed edges curled like autumn leaves. I opened it slowly, feeling the thrill of anticipation prick at my skin. Inside was a single typewritten note, sparse and cryptic. "The phantom waits at midnight. The bridge knows the truth. You cannot hide." No signature, no hint of identity, just the echo of a dare. Wolfe's gaze pierced me, sharp as a scalpel. "Observe, Archie," the careful choice of words. "Phantom. The bridge. It's theatrics, yes, but also precision. Someone with intellect. Someone confident. Someone foolish enough to think they can elude me." I followed him back to the brownstone, the city streets growing quieter as we left the rain-soaked avenues behind. In the sanctuary of his office, the warm scent of orchids mingled with the faint tang of old paper and polished wood. Wolfe immediately summoned Saul Panzer and Fred Durkin. Discretion, he instructed, and attention to the archival details. Someone is using history itself to mask their intentions. It wasn't just a game of shadows on steel beams. It was a puzzle wrapped in the ghosts of the past. Wolfe laid out old blueprints of the bridge, its rusting girders and forgotten compartments traced in meticulous ink. Every rivet, every span held significance, and I could feel the tension building in the room, a quiet suspense that hummed beneath the ordinary sounds of typewriters and distant streetcars. I pored over the maps with him, my heart thudding gently. Somewhere in the rain-slicked night, a figure waited. Someone invisible yet intentional, leaving hints like breadcrumbs for us to follow. And the thought made the city feel alive, whispering secrets in every puddle, every rusted bolt. Wolfe's voice cut through my reverie. "Archie, pay attention. The bridge itself is part of the message. Every shadow, every beam could be a clue. Someone wants us to notice, but only if we are worthy." That night, as I lay awake in my small room, the rain tapping a gentle rhythm on the window pane, I imagined the phantom moving across the old bridge, a solitary figure in the mist, carrying secrets that could unsettle the entire city. The suspense wasn't loud. It was subtle, like the slow tightening of a clock spring. And I knew, with Wolfe at my side, we would follow the trail, no matter how shadowed or treacherous it became. Chapter 2. The Phantom's Clues. The morning after the first cryptic note. The city seemed to wake under a soft gray haze, the wet streets still shimmering from last night's rain. Wolfe, in his usual deliberate fashion, had decided that the next move required boots on the old bridge. I grabbed my coat, feeling the chill settle into my bones, and met Saul Panzer and Fred Durkin near the bridge's shadowed entrance. The place was deserted, save for the occasional gull calling from the river below. Fog curled around the steel arches, thick enough to obscure the far side of the bridge, yet thin enough to let the outline of rusted girders loom like ancient sentinels. The air smelled of cold metal and damp earth, a quiet scent, almost hypnotic, that made every step feel like trespassing in a forgotten realm. I noticed small, almost imperceptible markings along the beams, scratches and patterns, numbers carved faintly into the rust, and symbols that seemed to shimmer faintly in the diffused morning light. They weren't random, they were deliberate. Saul, always practical, squinted and muttered, either a deranged artist or someone very careful. I immediately thought of Wolfe. He would love this. Back at the brownstone, Wolfe spread the city's archival maps of the bridge across his massive desk. Blueprints, old inspection logs, construction records. They formed a labyrinth of paper, a historical map overlaid with decades of industrial memory. He studied the marks I had brought photos of and began to trace lines between the numbers and symbols, his finger moving slowly as if he were conducting a symphony of steel and rust. "Observe, Archie," he said, voice calm, almost hypnotic. "Each mark corresponds to a particular beam, a specific span, and a date. It is a cipher of place and time. Someone wishes us to follow, but on their terms." I sat back, letting the rhythm of his deduction wash over me. There was a strange calm in the office, punctuated only by the quiet scratching of his pen and the faint hiss of steam from the kettle. Suspense, subtle but constant, hung in the air like the fog on the bridge. I left the brownstone later to check in with local informants, tracing the whispers of the phantom. Alleyways smelled of damp cardboard and roasted chestnuts. The voices I found were hushed, almost conspiratorial. One bartender mentioned a shadowy figure in a long coat, carrying a black satchel, who appeared and vanished with the silence of a ghost. Another spoke of a man moving along the girders at night, seen only as a silhouette against the misty lights of the city. Returning to Wolfe, I found him piecing together a pattern that was more than a riddle. It was a map to a hidden compartment within the bridge. My pulse quickened. Somewhere among the rusted beams and fog, a secret waited, deliberately placed for discovery. Someone intelligent, meticulous, and unafraid of danger had orchestrated it all. That night, as I stared at the photographs and diagrams Wolfe had annotated, I imagined the phantom gliding over the bridge, leaving his cryptic signs for us to follow. The suspense was gentle, almost musical. The soft tension of stories slowly unfolding, like the rhythm of water under bridge, carrying whispers of secrets hidden for decades. I realized then that this wasn't just a case of theft or vandalism. It was a carefully choreographed intellectual challenge, and Wolfe thrived in such an atmosphere. Every mark on the steel, every shadow in the fog, was a note in a symphony of intrigue, one that we were only beginning to hear. Chapter 3, Midnight Rendezvous. Night fell slowly, like ink spilling across the city, and the rain returned, soft at first, then steady, drumming a quiet rhythm on the rooftops and the metal girders of the old bridge. Wolfe, after much deliberation and his usual grumbling, had decided I should stake out the bridge while he remained in the brownstone, decoding the cipher we had discovered the day before. Saul and Fred were positioned strategically, hidden among the shadows, ready to signal at the first sign of movement. The fog hung low, curling around the beams like spectral fingers. Streetlights at the far end of the bridge cast pale reflections in the puddles on the planking, shimmering in the mist. Every sound, the distant rumble of a train, the whisper of wind to the girders, was amplified, heightening the sense that the bridge itself was alive and watching. I felt my heartbeat synchronize with the rhythmic dripping of water from the ironwork. The suspense was subtle but insistent, like a taut string waiting for release. At precisely midnight, a figure emerged from the fog. He moved with the fluidity of someone accustomed to treading unseen, his black coat brushing against the steel, a satchel slung low and purposeful. I watched through binoculars as he paused at a beam, faint markings glinting in the pale light. He produced a small crowbar and worked carefully, almost reverently, prying loose a panel that had clearly been hidden for decades. The moment was hypnotic. Every movement was deliberate, calculated, and yet there was a rhythm to it, a silent poetry in his clandestine labor. I signaled Saul, who froze at the other end, as if the bridge itself demanded stillness. Before we could move in, the phantom paused, looking down at the river, the mist curling around him like a veil. I could almost hear him thinking, calculating his next step, aware that someone was watching but confident he had the upper hand. Then, like a shadow dissolving into the fog, he leapt, disappearing from view with a grace that made the heart skip a beat. All that remained was a small, dusty box, abandoned in the exact spot he had been working. Saul and Fred recovered it carefully, handing it to me. Inside was a leather-bound ledger, its pages yellowed and brittle, filled with entries spanning decades. It was immediately clear that this was no ordinary record. The ledger detailed transactions tied to bridge's construction, bribes, and hidden accounts, implicating a powerful construction magnate who had mysteriously vanished years ago. Back at the brownstone, Wolfe examined the ledger with a quiet, almost reverential satisfaction. He didn't need to speak. His expression alone said enough. "The Phantom is clever," he said finally, "but intellect has its limits. Even the most careful plan leaves a trail, and Archie, will follow to its end." I leaned back, letting the suspense settle like a fine mist in the room. The city outside was quiet again, but the echoes of the bridge's mystery lingered. Somewhere out there, a figure moved under the cover of fog, orchestrating secrets from the past. And somewhere in a ledger, the truth waited, patient and inexorable. That night, as the rain tapped against the brownstone windows, I thought about the bridge, its secrets, and the phantom. There was a strange, calming rhythm in the unfolding puzzle, like the soft, deliberate turning of gears in an ancient machine. The suspense wasn't loud. It was subtle, steady, and intoxicating, pulling me deeper into the enigma of the phantom's world. Chapter 4. Threads of the past morning sun struggled through a gray haze, barely penetrating the mist that still clung to the old bridge and its rusted girders. Wolfe, seated at his massive desk in the brownstone, had a ledger spread before him, each page a delicate puzzle of ink and history. His expression was calm, precise, and mesmerizing. Every flick of his finger across the entries radiated confidence and quiet suspense. The ledger revealed a web of illicit activity, forged permits, falsified inspections, and bribery linked to the bridge's structural flaws. The ramifications were staggering. Lives have been endangered, accidents covered up, and the truth buried beneath decades of paper and bureaucracy. Wolfe's eyes gleamed with that familiar mix of irritation and fascination. "Observe, Archie," he said, voice soft and insistent. "The ledger is not merely a record. It is a map to a long-forgotten injustice. The Phantom's purpose is revealed through it. This is a man driven by duty or perhaps by revenge, seeking to expose the consequences of human negligence." I leaned over the desk, tracing the names and dates with my finger. Every line told a story of ambition and corruption, of mistakes hidden beneath layers of official indifference. The suspense was subtle, like the quiet build of a storm. We were walking backward in time, threading together a narrative long buried, piece by piece. Wolfe's mind worked like a fine-tuned instrument. He cross-referenced city records, construction permit, and old newspaper clippings, his fingers tracing invisible lines between events separated by decades. Slowly, the Phantom's identity began to crystallize. A former engineer, dismissed unjustly after raising alarms about the bridge's flaws. The man had vanished into anonymity, taking nothing but a burning need for justice. By evening, Wolfe had devised a plan to confront the Phantom without endangering anyone or allowing the ledger to fall into unwise hands. "Archie," he said, his voice now carrying a rare note of anticipation, "we must act carefully. This is a delicate dance, and timing is everything. The Phantom is intelligent and cautious, but all plans, no matter how clever, leave a trace." That night, we returned to the bridge. The fog was heavier now, curling around the girders like slow-moving smoke. Streetlights cast pale halos through the mist, creating long, uncertain shadows that danced across the wet planks. The suspense was tangible. Every step on the bridge echoed softly, magnifying the sense that we were trespassing in a world that existed between reality and memory. From my vantage point, I could see subtle movements, a shadow shifting, a coat fluttering briefly in the mist. The Phantom was near, drawn, as we suspected, by the ledger, the key to revealing the truth. Saul and Fred were in position, hidden but ready, like sentinels waiting for the final note of a symphony. Wolfe's instructions were precise and quiet, each word measured. He had orchestrated everything to draw the phantom out without force, allowing intelligence and patience to guide us. The suspense wasn't abrupt or jarring. It flowed slowly, like the gentle mist curling over steel, hypnotic in its rhythm, and almost soothing in its inevitability. As the phantom appeared on the bridge, moving with the quiet grace of someone who had haunted it for decades, I realized the elegance of Wolfe's planning. The confrontation was coming, but it was not yet violent. It was a dance of intellect, strategy, and timing. The bridge itself seemed to hold its breath, the past and present converging in a moment of near sacred anticipation. That night, as we watched and waited, I understood the subtle thrill of this case. The suspense was not in a chase or a fight, but in the delicate unweaving of history, the slow revelation of motives, and the hypnotic rhythm of discovery. Every whisper of the wind through the girders, every shadow in the fog, carried the weight of the past, and the promise of resolution. Chapter 5. The Twist in the Fog. Night had fallen again, but this time the city felt almost still, as if it were holding its breath. The bridge, slick from an earlier drizzle, loomed like a spectral monument, its girders fading into the fog. Wolfe, calm as ever, had orchestrated the final stage of our plan with meticulous precision. Saul and Fred were stationed discreetly, hidden in shadows, while I followed Wolfe's directions, my senses alert to the faintest sound of movement. The ledger, the key to the phantom's purpose, was securely in Wolfe's hands. The tension was subtle, a quiet undercurrent beneath the rhythmic patter of rain and the occasional distant train. Every drop of water on the steel echoed softly, magnifying the stillness. The suspense was almost meditative, hypnotic, like watching a river flow slowly over rocks before a sudden cascade. From the fog, a figure appeared. The phantom moved with the ease and grace of a ghost, as if the bridge itself were part of him. The satchel was slung low, containing decades of secrets, carefully gathered evidence, and the last piece of his personal mission. Proof of negligence cover-ups and corruption linked to the bridge's collapse and the vanished magnate. Wolfe stepped forward, voice calm and measured. "I believe you are aware, sir, that your efforts have been observed. Every move, every mark, every shadow you have left has been traced." The phantom froze, eyes flicking to the ledger in Wolfe's hand, realization dawning. Yet he did not panic. Instead, he exhaled softly, a quiet acknowledgement of respect. This was a man of principle, not malice, and Wolfe understood that instinctively. "The ledger," Wolfe continued, "contains truths that cannot be ignored. But the law, not vengeance, must administer justice. Your mission is admirable, but reckless. Fortunately, I have already ensured its safe delivery to the proper authorities." The phantom, caught between relief and awe, stepped back. For a moment, the rain, the fog, and the spectral bridge held their breath along with us. Then, in a last flourish of Wolfe's characteristic elegance, he handed the man a cup of coffee from an insulated flask he had brought along, a subtle gesture of human kindness and control over a tense moment. We escorted the ledger back to the brownstone. Wolfe, ever the strategist, ensured that the evidence would be presented responsibly, exposing corruption while protecting the innocent. The phantom, relieved yet humbled, understood that his battle had been guided by intellect and patience, not force or desperation. As I watched the man disappear into the fog, I realized a twist. The phantom had not been a villain, nor had he been purely heroic. He was a force of moral urgency, a shadow of the past seeking acknowledgement. Yet Wolfe had ensured the truth was revealed with both wisdom and tact. The resolution was quiet, satisfying, and entirely in keeping with the cerebral elegance of Wolfe's methods. Back at the brownstone, Wolfe poured himself a brandy, his calm presence filling the room. "The phantom," he said, voice smooth as silk, "was clever, Archie. But even shadows cannot outwit reason indefinitely." I smiled, settling into my chair. "And you, Wolfe, make even a ghost look like a minor inconvenience." He sipped his brandy, eyes distant, reflecting the lights of the city and the silent arc of the bridge in the fog. Outside, the rain had stopped. The bridge stood quiet and patient, its secrets finally revealed, its history reconciled with justice. The suspense that haunted us for days dissolved into a soothing satisfaction. The mystery solved, the intellect honored, and the noir cityscape returned to calm.